Is the Vince McMahon, Bruce Prichard era of WWE better than the Pul Heyman one? It's probably too early to say. We're 3 weeks into this era after Pul Heyman was removed as executive director earlier this month, and then we had Backlash, greatest wrestling match of all time, and then we've had like a sort of interim changeover part of Raw, and then we've had 2 weeks of solid McMahon Prichard booking, and that is last week's Championship Monday, which saw a load of title defenses without any build really, short matches, and just a really scatterbrain approach to stuff. And then this week, I would argue that settled down a bit into quite a fun, frantic way where everyone had something to do. And crucially, there's some really strong characters and matches coming off the back of it. I'm mainly talking about Sasha Banks and Asuka, which I'm incredibly into. This is a title for debate. It's not something we're saying outright, but I must admit, although I thought this was overall an average episode of Raw, there is something to it. It's not the doom and gloom that I expected.
What Ollie is saying is that Pul Heyman was a garbage person who has never booked anything good in his life, and he loves Vince McMahon and Bruce Prichard and their vision for what wrestling should be. It's just so we're all on the same page with this. Ollie does not like Pul Heyman and thought that building new stars was a terrible idea.
Okay, so I know you're being facetious here and trolling. However, the last couple of weeks of Raw has had something. And it is this sort of star presence that's been lacking. I know Big Show has no place being around in 2020. Same with Ric Flair. And then you've the Christian stuff. However, it does feel that sort of level of sports entertainment, that sort of big level of showmanship that Vince McMahon has built his whole company around and sort of turned modern day mainstream wrestling into that style. And if you look back at all the Pul Heyman stuff, granted, he was somewhat hampered by whatever Vince would say yes and no to. The Pul Heyman stuff was a bit repetitive.
Well, I mean, we've said it quite a few times on this show that Heyman is not without his flaws, and not everything that he did in his era of Raw was perfect. The Rusev Lashley storyline was bad. The Micah Maria Kanellis stuff was bad. He was doing that sort of shock jock stuff that you would have done in the late 90s. And kind of in fairness, on the flip side of that, Prichard and McMahon they're doing Attitude Era style, not storytelling, but booking of a show, which is heavy emphasis on interviews, heavy emphasis on backstage segments, low emphasis on in-ring wrestling. Because in-ring wrestling back in the day was what used to turn viewers off. Viewers would tune in to watch the characters cut promos and do in-ring segments and skits and whatnot. And then as soon as a match would start, flick over to Nitro and see if they had some in-ring segments and stuff going over there. So what they've done is that they are putting more emphasis back onto that as opposed to the in-ring wrestling. And, in fairness, the ratings have gone up since they took over. As you said, McMahon has essentially created the casual audience wrestling. He's cultivated this over the last 30, 40 years. And now he's just going back to what he knows. And Prichard knows what Vince McMahon will say yes to. So the pair of them together are just putting together these shows for casual fans. And in some sense, that does work.
I wonder how loaded, well, obviously the title's very loaded, but we keep calling this the McMahon-Prichard era, as if the previous year was just the Heyman era. But it never was. It was always the McMahon-Heyman era. So if we started calling this the Prichard era, maybe people would be more open to praising it a bit more, because you got the stuff like the Rusev angle, the Kanellis stuff. I imagine that was Heyman trying to pop Vince.
Yeah.
And it failed for everyone. And Bruce has had that problem as well with the dog food stuff over on SmackDown with Roman Reigns and Baron Corbin. And the sort of the Sheamus Jeff Hardy urine throwing story.
Yeah,
it's a replay of the McMahon, Shawn Michaels storyline from before.
And reports are that Vince McMahon found it hilarious and could not stop laughing at it.
Low, bodily fluids. So that this was reported at a lot at the time when Prichard was given the position over Heyman earlier this month. And that is, Prichard knows how to work within the confines of McMahon more. Whereas Heyman would slowly annoy McMahon, and McMahon would probably suddenly shut down ideas and stuff. So maybe, I think we should... Bruce is a complicated fellow. He's obviously a political mastermind in the industry in terms of...
genius.
Just sort of playing agendas off of people and never really falling out with people, but he somehow manages to rise to the top of a company over the course of just over a year. And I think we shouldn't underestimate him as a potential Trojan horse for good. WWE will always be Vince McMahon's baby, and he is the ultimate yes or no sayer to a lot of the angles and creative we see. However, Bruce might be able to work within those confines better than Heyman, who was always going to combust and self-implode. And we said this isn't new. We said this a year ago at the time.
Yeah. The reason why we've got this title as well is that you and I were discussing on the morning meeting, sort of our thoughts on Raw, because like broadly, broad strokes, this episode of Raw, I don't mind the McMahon Prichard shotgun approach of just like boom, 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 segment, match for 2 minutes, segment. Like, I don't mind it, to be honest. And it does have this sort of like fun, chaotic flow and sort of like, the story-long narratives and stuff. I'm just not invested in any stories at present. I think that's the problem I have with Raw at the moment, is that I'm not really invested in Dolph versus Drew, because I'm never going to buy Dolph as a contender. I'm really not into the Street Profits versus Andrade Garza now, because, well, why would I be at this point? They just got beat 2-on-1 and they keep infighting. And like, the only thing I'm really interested in at the moment is Sasha Asuka, because Sasha and Bayley are so great. Asuka's so great, but I don't think they've done a particularly great job presenting Asuka. But we talked about this a little bit, and you said that on Reddit, the feedback to the show was really positive. Everyone was saying, as the title of this is, that the Prichard McMahon era is better than Heyman's.
So far, a lot of people and a lot of upvoting comments were like, I'm enjoying this more than the Heyman stuff over the last couple of months. Again, we should put a big asterisk next to that and say maybe that was just because Vince was turning down more Heyman stuff, and there was obviously coronavirus threw a lot of plans into disarray.
Yeah.
But yeah, you said on Twitter the reaction was the opposite.
Yes. So I've gone through like the react. So I put up a tweet about how the Ruby Riott hasn't won a match since February last year and is currently on Raw since her comeback 0 for 11. Which is not a great run. I know she was out for a lot of 2019, but
the streak.
But the feedback I got to that was like, Ibrahim, who gets in touch with the podcast a lot, said this Raw was really bad except for the Seth stuff in the main event. Conservative Ginger said the entire episode of Raw was hot trash this week. Another week of what seems to be the burial of the top female champion. And so I also went through the YouTube comments for your review to see if I could find some people who were being positive about the show. And I'll be honest, the majority of it was people not liking it. Atoa said painfully boring to sit through. Already hate the Bruce Prichard era with part-timers as the main stars. Big Show has around 4 segments. That's all you need to know. Mark Farley said turned it off after 5 minutes. Dashi45 said 3 out of 4, not great this week. The only one I could find, the only positive comment I could find was from Robert McCarthy, who said, I really think Raw is better these past 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's look, me and Luke, we spoke earlier. We both have the same opinion. This was an all right show.
It's perfectly fine. It was just so fine. Like, I know I got up at 5:45 to watch it because I got sunburn over the weekend and I couldn't really sleep. So I don't know if that affected my mood, but when I was watching, I was like, this is the same show we got last week, basically. And it feels like it's the same show we've had for the last 3 weeks. And I'm just not really invested in the storylines at the moment.
Yeah, it's just interesting how, some comments on Reddit, the most upvoted ones were, what, this is really fun. This is a really good bit. And then, Twitter and YouTube is more like, this is one of the worst episodes of the year. And then me and you sit here and be like, middle of the road, really, by Raw standards.
it was perfectly fine. Like, you know, that second hour flew by.
You know what? Maybe it's symptomatic of a tribalistic, argumentative nature that's been fostered in social media. I don't know. Maybe it is okay to just think something is blur or in the middle. Although Eurovision was a piece of crap.
I was going to, unless it was the Woken Matt Hardy match that was on Raw, because I was not allowed to think that was fine.
No, you're going to have an opinion one way or the other. Otherwise, you'll be hounded.